This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and you can listen to the X-Zone 24/7, 365, as well as during our live broadcast Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight Eastern at www.xzoneradiotv.com. Man, talk about timely interviews. My guest this hour is the perfect guest. Well, she is perfect in many ways, but when it comes to Halloween, there is no one that I know that can top this guest. I'm talking about JUDIKA ILLES, and she fell in love with the magical art as a child and has been studying them ever since. An independent scholar and researcher, JUDIKA is the author of the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft. You getting the picture here, Exonation? The Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells, the Encyclopedia of Spirits, Pure Magic, a complete course in spellcasting, Magic When You Need It, the Weezer Field Guide to Witches, and the Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Spirits. She is also the author of the Weezer Field Guide to the Paranormal, published under the alias Judith Joyce. And JUDIKA is currently editing a compilation of classic horror stories. Her website, www.judikailles.com. And JUDIKA, welcome back to the X-Zone.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's great having you with us again, my friend. You are one busy lady.
I know. I know. Sometimes I just want to take a vacation.
What's a vacation?
Oh, going to the beach, getting offline.
And my wife was telling me that we're going down to Cuba for a week. So.
Oh, wow.
Guess what?
That sounds interesting.
I'm just going to lay on the beach and drink margaritas all day.
Mojitos.
Mojitos, is that it? Okay.
I think so. It wasn't Hemingway. When Hemingway went to Cuba, I think that's what he drank.
Wow. I'll have to try them then.
But they'll tell you when you get there.
Really? Yeah, I love going down to the islands.
Me too.
You know, I don't mind cruising. I like, mind you, my idea of a vacation is going to one spot, plunking myself down, and resting. Right. You know?
Me too.
Listen, I love your books. I love having you on the show. But why is Halloween so special to witches and practitioners of magic? If anybody can answer that question, you can.
There is a belief, and it is it is definitely an ancient and fairly universal belief that, do you know, there's this belief that there are parallel realms of existence. So here we are in the living world, and then there is also the realm of the dead, where those who have passed on exist, whether in whatever realm they are. Right. I've had it described as being like a catering hall with different rooms, and so different heavens for different, you can, depending on what your belief system is and where your loved ones are, that's where you'll go. But the veil between those realms becomes sheer at certain times of the year, and it becomes easier to communicate, for the living and the dead to communicate with each other. A lot of traditional witchcraft has to do with that balance, maintaining that balance between the worlds of the living and the dead. And so this is really a time where, the spirits walk. It's a time when the fairies are supposed to come out of the mounds, in Ireland, and it is a time when we can mingle with the beings of other realms, and so it's a special time. I'm working on a workshop for an event, and I was researching a little bit and there are festivals of the dead going back to ancient Egypt that occur at roughly the same time.
No, that can't be just coincidence. This has to be something much more.
Right? It has to be a response to something.
Right.
So, it's not the exact date, but it's roughly this time of year.
So tell me, based on your experience and your expertise, what's the difference between Halloween and Samhain, or Samhain?
Well, that is Samhain. Although there are slightly different pronunciations, it's a Celtic word. It is a festival deriving from the Celtic parts of Britain, and so slightly different pronunciations if you're from Scotland or from Ireland. In America, we say Samhain usually, but you don't. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong way.
So I'm not going to have a witch. Samhain. I'm not going to have a witch doing a spell on me because I said it the wrong way.
It going back to that concept that at this time of the year, people from all over the world noticed that there's a little more ghostly phenomenon going on than at other times. Samhain, the ancient Celtic year, was divided into two halves. There was the light half and the dark half. Very literally, in Samhain, October 31st, November 1st, marked the dark half of the year. The harvest was in, it was getting dark, the ghosts were out, the ancestors were coming back to visit. Good time for telling stories, a good time for entertaining each other with ghost stories and rituals to keep ourselves safe. Halloween, the word hallow is an old word for saint.
Right.
And November 1st is
All Saints Day, yes.
It's the Feast of All Hallows. It's the same time as Irish immigrants came over to the Americas. They brought a lot of their holidays with them, and they sort of merged here. The whole jack-o'-lantern concept, that's very Irish and Scottish. They don't have that in other parts of Europe. I mean, they do now because they've picked it up from us. It's sort of, made a return trip over. But modern Wiccans who celebrate the spiritual aspects of the day prefer Samhain. Trick-or-treaters tend to like Halloween, but it's the same date.
Well, I discovered something talking about conspiracy theories that Halloween is actually promoted by the Canadian and American Dental Association so that they can get more clients.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I have heard that.
Where does the trick or treat come from?
It was believed that ghosts, all different kinds of ghosts, wandered around this time. It could be your family members coming with friendly intentions. Grandma wants to see how you're doing. But there were also, let's say, ghosts with no living relatives left. These hungry ghosts wandering around, and they could get frustrated and angry. And it became traditional to put out offerings. And the Day of the Dead, the Latin American festival, is around the same time. And if you are making offerings for your relatives, you bring them inside. But you don't want to invite strange ghosts into your home, so you would keep those offerings outside. And after a while, it sort of became a custom for kids to dress up as ghosts, stick a sheet on you. And of course, the costumes have gotten much more elaborate. But originally, they were very simple, and you'd come and knock on the door. And, there's a joke aspect of it. Of course, people knew these were children and not real ghosts, but they would dress up as ghosts, and it was trick or treat. You gave them a little treat, so they didn't play a trick.
Ah, gotcha. And wasn't the jack-o'-lantern actually, didn't it have something to do with potatoes?
It had turnips.
Turnips, yeah.
Originally. Yeah, in Ireland they do them with turnips. There's a magic spell behind the tradition of jack-o'-lanterns. It's been forgotten. Most people just do it because it's what people do at Halloween, and it's people have jack-o'-lantern contests who can carve the scariest or most fun jack-o'-lantern. But originally, the thought was that if you put a light inside these hollowed-out vegetables, and it's a harvest festival, in this hemisphere, we have brought, the snow is coming, and we have brought whatever, if you're going to bring in the harvest, you better do it. And that concept of the harvest, the old, the traffic song, it's an old English folk song, John Barleycorn Must Die. The concept that the harvest, the grim reaper with the scythe, the plants are actually sacrificed. They don't go willingly necessarily. So that concept that there is this awareness that even when we cut down wheat and corn and turnips or whatever it is, they're making a sacrifice for us. It's literally a harvest. And so what people would do is they would carve out a turnip, which is not easy if you have ever tried to do it. They're really hard.
Yeah, just cutting a turnip for supper is really hard.
Yeah. Turnips and gourds originally, you would hollow them out and put a light within them. And then, you'd carve them so that the light would shine through. Mm-hmm. It was intentionally done to keep people safe from all those wandering ghosts.
Wow.
That is at the heart of the holiday, is that as the sun, as the weather is getting colder, mm-hmm. the ghosts come back to visit. And the winter in a good part of Europe, in the colder parts of Europe, is considered the time when the ghosts come. And they, and there are all kinds of ways to, you want to pacify them and, not have them become too comfortable in your home and, where you develop these haunted house scenarios. You want to have peace with them and have them go back to where they belong.
And hopefully let them stay there,
Yeah. And so that is, it's a time of sort of, and if you think of it as a time when there isn't really enough, there aren't necessarily enough supplies for everyone. Mm-hmm. People are cold, maybe they're a little hungry, they're suffering from, SAD, that, there's no sunlight, and now you have to compete with all these ghosts also. There's that sense of danger in the air. And so a lot of these traditions are meant to maintain that balance to get you through to the spring.
Well, wasn't Halloween also considered to be a romantic holiday at one time?
Yes, it was. By the time of the Victorians, it develops into this very lovely romantic holiday. It more so at that point than St. Valentine's Day. There are if you look online, you'll find all these vintage Halloween postcards,
right,
from let's say the very early 20th century, very late 19th century, where you have these, it's revolutionary. These are revolutionary art forms that now go for quite a bit of money. The more vintage postcards, because up until then, with very few exceptions, witches were portrayed as grotesque and ugly and scary, and all of a sudden you have these postcards with charming, beautiful witches and romantic scenes. There are a lot of rituals that are romantic rituals intended to be done on the night of October 31st for you to see your true love. Example, if you are a single person, it was suggested that you go into a room with a mirror. You should only have one candle as light. So, you turn everything off except for that one candle and look in the mirror. And sometimes you can look directly in the mirror. Sometimes you have to, stand with your back to the mirror and turn your head so you're looking over your shoulder. And the legend is you will see your true love in the mirror at midnight. So, all over these, all over the region, people were doing all kinds of little rituals to see, would they be married? Would they find their true love? Are they married to their true love? Is there another true love?
So when it comes to the to Halloween itself, when did it change from a romantic holiday to Halloween?
I think it's a dentist, actually. Honestly, I think with the rise of candy sales,
right?
It stopped being. Even in my childhood, I remember Halloween parties. It's not as now. Kids go to the mall with their bags of they get candy and treats. It stopped. It was very much a holiday for families and for adults. If you look at the Sleepy Hollow stories, there are Halloween parties with adults. The entire families go, and then it shifted. I think because there was money to be made. You can sell. You sold costumes to children. Now you go to the supermarket. Every year. Honestly, I love Halloween, and every year it just gets a little less and less fun in sort of the mass marketplaces. You used to find, I don't know, Halloween tchotchkes, Halloween memorabilia. Some of them were clever.
Yeah.
People who like Halloween would look out for the stuff. I have, little mugs in the shape of pumpkins and black cats and, white sheet ghosts. And now it's nothing but, huge bags of candy. And it's the same three, same three candies.
Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that the Halloween costumes are getting quite elaborate. The foam inserts to give the little guy or a little gal a shape that they one day hope to have. And even here we have, what are they called? Just give me a second here. They're like secondhand clothes stores. And at and at Halloween, they've become Halloween Central stores with Halloween costume consultants. Like, well, come on.
We have these shops at the malls that are seasonal.
Yeah.
For about a month they sell Halloween costumes, and then they move right on to Christmas ornaments, and and then they're kind of vacant for a couple of months. But it's very transient, and it's very
impersonal.
They're so obviously out to make a buck. There's no fun in it anymore. There is on smaller levels, and I think on the internet there are artisans and individuals. It's all what is fun, and I wish I drank beer because I love. I happen not to like beer or ale, but if you, I know, I like cider.
Okay,
but if you go and look, there are all sorts of great labels. There's seasonal pumpkin ales, and they have wonderful labels for the season, and that's so much fun. There's like a Warlock beer, just really, if I had the space to just buy bottles and not drink any of it, I would invest in all of these. They are wonderful. The art is still there, but so much of it is just kind of squeeze some money out of some parents and move on to the next holiday.
Why do you think witches have received such a bad rap throughout history? If it wasn't for witches, we wouldn't have apothecaries. They were the original naturopaths. Why was
My
it?
opinion?
Yeah, does it have something to do with the religious factors?
Only tangentially. I mean, that's often the excuse used. I think that people who are drawn to witchcraft tend to be very independent-minded. The whole aspect of spell casting is, it's not about cursing other people. It's about improving your own life yourself. Witches tend to be very independent. They are not necessarily the greatest followers, not necessarily the most obedient people. And I think authorities of all kinds, whether they are secular or religious, there's a tradition of witches being kind of uppity women. Even with the healers, there is a point where, only men can be healers in Europe. And you have to have a certain kind of an education. And you have all these women in villages sort of saying, my mother did this and I know how to do it and I'm going to do it anyway.
Why not?
And, why not? Because people came and, tormented them and tortured them and said terrible things about them and killed a lot of people. So that is, if you think about how much information has been lost, that's what kind of medical secrets we've lost.
Well,
this oral tradition of healing.
It's funny because the human race is a violent race,
Yeah.
And we try to pass ourselves off as, kind, considerate, and all the things we're really not.
I'm always offended when people say, they want to criticize someone who's done something terrible and they compare them to animals. But, it's not the animals, it's us.
Exactly. And if the animals of this planet and the insects of this planet ever decided to team up and go to war with us, we'd be gone in no time flat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, the loss of the bees and the bats and all these pollinating creatures, they don't have to team up. We're doing it.
So what's the deal with witches and the broom? Is that because they like cleaning? Does it have, witches, do they really fly?
It is one of the criticisms. If you can go back and read witch trial testimony. Some of it has been retained from all over the place, and one of the complaints often is that the witches, are not staying home and doing their housework. They're flying off to mountaintops and having fun. They're having parties when they should be home cleaning. These disobedient women. Halloween and witchcraft is about two things. One is the relationship with the dead, and the other is the process of birth. The two mysteries of life. How do we get here, and where are we going? And they're so, I think, embedded, we don't really see them, but there's an awful lot of fertility symbols in Halloween imagery. And that broomstick, the stick and the broom, is, where you have this sort of male-female, this conjunction of male energies and female energies. So the broom is one of them, where you have, the male part being the stick and that sort of skirt around. And that is, back in ancient Greece, that was, the brooms were symbols of midwifery. In the way that, when I was a kid, do you remember the striped, the barbershop poles?
Yes, definitely.
If you saw the pole, right? If you saw the pole, you knew it was a barbershop.
Exactly.
Way back when, brooms were symbolic of a midwife, and midwives would help women give birth.
That's right.
But they would also help people die. The two portals in and out of this life, and so that is really at the heart. And you'll see it also as a cauldron. Cauldrons are kind of uterine symbols. So the witch's hat is also that kind of pointy hat. There's a lot of those.
All right, let's talk more about this great topic on the other side of this break, Judika. Judika Illes is our special guest, X-Zone Nation, a wonderful lady, good friend of the X-Zone Nation, www.judikailles.com. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. In the final hour of tonight's show, I'm going to be replaying a show that I did with Bob Williams, who is also known as Jan Starks, who passed away earlier today from a stroke at a very young age. He is one of the most visionary broadcasters I ever had the pleasure of meeting. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. The ability to access the knowledge of the universe is much easier for us to access than we may believe. Brad Johnson, conscious matrix communicator, is one of these unique individuals who is able to access a strong connection to the universal mind. Through his connection, Brad has assisted thousands of clients from all over the world through natural intuitive assistance. The intuitive information received is vast, covering a wide range of subjects. Brad's innate ability includes being able to access one's own universal matrix to help them realize their potential to create a life of profound greatness. One-on-one private sessions with Brad Johnson are available to anyone from around the world. Brad is also a proficiently trained psychic, Akashic Records reader, and online spiritual teacher, founder of his own unique and powerful healing system, Body Regeneration Healing, as well as a professional conscious channeler in communication with his own higher self-consciousness known as Adronis. For more information or to book a service appointment with Brad Johnson, visit his website at www.consciousmatrix.com. That's www.consciousmatrix.com. You're a pumpkin.
I was a pumpkin, a big orange pumpkin.
A big orange pumpkin. And were there a lot of children out there?
Not so much.
No? Did you get a lot of candy?
Yeah, I got a lot of candy. Mommy's eating all the chocolate bars.
Well, tell Mommy that's your candy, honey.
Okay.
Tell her.
Stop eating all my chocolate bars, Mommy. Daddy's sick.
Oh, let me see. It's October the 22nd. Halloween is the 31st. That means how many more days? Come on,
Not
guys.
many.
Not many at all. Let me see. 9 days. Ooh. Judika Illes is my special guest this hour, www.judikailles.com. Judika, what's the difference between witchcraft and Wicca?
Wicca is a religion that may or may not incorporate witchcraft. Witchcraft, when people, Wicca is easier to explain. Wicca is the modern religion founded on the teachings of Gerald Gardner, based on Western and Northern European, especially British, pre-Christian traditions. That it celebrates the wheel of the year. It is a religion about being in harmony with the earth. Witchcraft is an international phenomenon. It is probably the real oldest profession, and it has to do with people who, and there are male witches and there are female witches, people who want to know. The concept of witches as people who want to know the secrets of the earth. They want to know how things work. Which plants are good for what? How do we cast a spell? How do we, develop our these paranormal, for lack of a better word, powers? How do we tap into all this earth knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
Witches come in, every religion or no religion. I know atheist, witches. They come from all over the world. They have different ways of doing things, but what they have in common is that desire to know. They're inquisitive people. They're kind of, magpies in parts of in Russia and in Poland are associated, Siberia are associated with witches, and there's that kind of magpie quality.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know,
Sure.
What's out there? How does this work?
What I find rather strange is the similarities at times between witchcraft or Wicca and Christianity.
Sure.
For example, in a coven you have one warlock, 12 witches. In Christianity you have Jesus and the 12 apostles. And magic plays a major role in both of those concepts.
Oh, well, you get into numerology there.
Exactly.
You also have, the 12 tribes of
Mm-hmm.
Israel. You get, with I guess the 13th as God. You get into all these very interesting similarities. The numerology is so the power of the numbers, what the numbers radiate, is such a fascinating thing.
And then there's also the fact we celebrate Christmas on December the 25th, and
Right.
the winter solstice is on December the 21st.
Right.
And
Right.
it seems that
Right.
there was a marketing war going on between Christianity and witchcraft or paganism, and most of
the Sol Invictus, it's
Yeah.
the birthday of the sun.
Yeah.
And Emperor Constantine, who Saint Constantine, who was the first to embrace, the first Roman emperor
Mm-hmm.
to embrace Christianity as a state religion, was originally a devotee of Sol Invictus, the invincible sun. So there is and there are different theories. I would agree with you. I think that there is a little bit of that marketing there.
Sure.
But there are also people who say it's it just happened to happen like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's face it. The Vatican is the largest and most and the richest corporation in the world, but that's for another show.
Well, it is with Halloween, as All Hallows. That is the date the date of all there was a pagan Roman festival of the dead at the time that is now Halloween, and it was the time of pacifying those kind of hungry, aggressive ghosts. When they banished the pagan holiday, it made people nervous. And the concept of All Souls Day, All Saints Day and then All Souls Day, is, it was moved to that. Why is it then? Because people wanted to do something to, have peace with the dead, and you can't do Festival A, but here you can do this instead, and people are, okay, in that case, it's okay.
Because it's really ironic. You have October 31st, which is Halloween. Then you have All Saints Day on November 1st. And then November 2nd is the Day of the Dead.
The Day of the Dead, right. Yeah. Right, All Souls, right. Right, which is becoming a bigger and bigger holiday.
Really?
It's a huge holiday in Mexico, but it is spilling over into the U.S. and into Canada. So it's very interesting. I mean, I don't know. There was a children's movie. It's an animated movie, The Book of Life, last year.
No.
Which is based on Day of the Dead. The sugar skulls and the painted, the sort of the painted skull, the dressed up skeletons. I lived in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of Day of the Dead artwork there. Just these wonderful little tableaus and dioramas with skeletons and all kinds of. I have an Elvis skeleton. And he's in his white suit with his microphone, very recognizable. You look at that skeleton, you know whose skeleton that is. So it is, and we are, and I know that a lot of people in Mexico are very, they are annoyed that their children are now that their kids want to go trick-or-treating and get bags of candy. And, with the internet, we see what other people do.
Yeah.
And, and B, they feel, we are now appropriating their holiday, which has a tremendous spiritual aspect to it, which I think a lot of individuals do incorporate, but on the marketing side of it, the commercial side, I don't know that is reflected. More, buy a skeleton lollipop or something.
Do you know? Are you aware if the number of witches or people who are following or practice Wicca are increasing, decreasing, or just?
I think so.
Yeah.
No, I think increase. Well, it's hard to say because, as we say, a lot of people were in the broom closet until recently.
Yeah.
People are more. It is more accepted, and more people are. It's hard to say. Were people, are people admitting to what they were always doing, but now they're publicly admitting to it? So the old surveys were wrong, or it's possible that there's a lot more now because it's more accessible. You can go and buy books online that once upon a time were very difficult to find. You go online and you find, even if you were the only teenager in town who is interested in witchcraft, you don't have to be isolated anymore because you go online and you find a community. And you go on YouTube and you can find videos that will teach you how to do things that once upon a time you had to have another person. I was taught how to, you call it dressing a candle, how to create a magical candle. I was taught by other people. But now, you go on YouTube, you can see everything.
Listen, is there a connection between witches, Wicca, and goths?
I think the Venn diagram, there are probably a significant number of people who would identify as all three.
Mm-hmm.
They are distinct things, but I think that there are people, that's like, there are probably a lot of people who would identify as all three of them. A lot of, also, it's the time of year a lot of people like to dress up as witches. It's something, there are a lot of people who like to dress up as witches and like facets of witchcraft. I don't know if they would necessarily identify as a witch. In the same way that, there are people who are, committed to kind of a goth lifestyle.
Yeah.
and then there are people who, like to go shopping and get clothes and maybe go out that way. So you have a spectrum of people, but they all like Halloween. They all like this time of year.
What's the connection between witches, speaking about this time of year, and cornfields?
It's that harvest.
That's all it is.
It's really interesting. Well, it is the concept that the harvest is a dangerous thing, that it is an appreciation of food. And I think people who lived closer to the land and were very aware that, if the harvest failed, oh boy, you're in trouble. And, so there's a real spiritual aspect of it. Witches are often believed to either harm a cornfield or guard a cornfield, one or the other. It's really interesting. If you look at those old Halloween postcards, a lot of them will show you witches sitting in cornfields. It's very what are they doing there? Why do we have these hay rides beyond just that it's something fun to do with the kids? But that concept that you are, by harvesting the grain, you are releasing the spirits of grain into the atmosphere, and you have to make peace with them so they'll grow again. In the same way that there are hunting rituals, you can't just go out and, kill a bunch of deer and assume that there's that balance. Hunters used to have all kinds of magical rituals to make sure that, that balance between the hunted and the hunter was maintained, and that there would still be, next year,
sure,
there would be more animals. Very similar with plants and vegetables, and especially grain. And grain is this, if you look at history, the development of grain really just changes human history, because all of a sudden people become sedentary. They become involved in farming. They're not hunter-gatherers. They're not nomadic. There's the theory that, even the blood type A develops in response to the agricultural revolution. And also the concept that grain was originally domesticated not for bread, but for beer.
I'll drink to that. God bless the grains.
The oldest grain products are beer. And the concept of, one of the scholarly concepts of, where does witchcraft come from? That it is, they call it a beverage cult.
Sure, by drinking too much beer, you believe in witches. Okay.
that concept of intoxicants as being sacred. Ancient Samaria, bartenders, there were priestesses who were bartenders.
Yeah.
So it does go back that far.
Well, you can even look at religion today during the oh my gosh, when you go up to the altar and you accept the
mass, right?
The mass, and
right.
The priest gives you wine to drink,
and that's actually the communion wafer.
That's right. Yeah,
there was a legal case in New Jersey. There was a little girl who was allergic to wheat, but her devout parents wanted to get a wheat-free. They wanted to get a wafer, a communion wafer that was made of something, a different kind of wheat. And it went all the way up, a different kind of a grain. It went all the way up to the Vatican, and the Vatican refused. It was significant enough for the ritual that it remained a wheat product.
Well, I think in today's society, people take everything to the limit. Like people have gone crazy with being too politically correct is just one example,
Yeah.
Live and let live, damn it. And I, like Donald Trump, say Merry Christmas. My goodness.
I live in New Jersey, and so that case has always stayed with me. It was a big local case, but if you think about the significance of wheat, it's like the Love and Death, the Woody Allen movie. The wheat. But they were very insistent. It has to be wheat.
They must have a reason.
I think it is that, despite all the cynicism and it's all, all about the money and the cynicism, it is that spiritual importance of it is, everything has, every plant or every mineral or everything that occurs naturally on Earth has a power. Salt is considered purifying. It's, the ghost hunters bring out the salt. Salt for protection, salt for purity, garlic for protection, and wheat is tied into those mysteries of the universe. And it's commercialized. We see all those horror movies with the children of the corn, but at the heart there is something that apparently is still very significant to a lot of people.
There's still a fascination with young people with vampires. Why? Or The Walking Dead. Like, what's wrong with society, or is it me?
I don't know. I don't know. I go back and forth because I enjoy, I enjoy a horror story, but sometimes it's almost it's a little, that sort of obsession with death, and not in a good way, is a little upsetting. Sometimes you look around and everybody's wearing a skull, and everybody's The Walking Dead, The Living Dead. It is it makes you wonder.
For a society that fears death, we certainly have a growing fascination with it.
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now, dear?
I am working, speaking of, I am working on a collection of vintage horror stories that will be out in time for next Halloween. There is a compilation this year that was edited by an author named Milo Duquette, and it is a series. It's called the Weiser Book of Horror and the Occult, and I will be doing volume 2, and it's great stories, Lovecraft and Poe, and just some classic horror stories. I'm going to write an introduction for it, and I get to pick the stories, and I'm having a lot of fun with this. I mean, unfortunately, I have enough stories now for like 4 books, so it's kind of hard to pick, but we'll see what makes the final cut.
Listen, Judika, are there any other holidays beyond Halloween that are associated with witches?
Yes. And people are surprised sometimes, but...
all right, surprise me, dear friend, surprise me.
They don't use the term Christmas, but Yule, the winter solstice.
Ooh, that's right.
The concept of the 12 days of Christmas going into January 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany, which is where, the Italian witch Befana flies. And January 6th is a day that is associated with a lot of German witches, Hulda and Bertha.
And January the 6th is Little Christmas, where the 3 wise men brought the gifts to Jesus. Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
the Magi.
The magicians.
That's right.
Yeah, the 3 kings, the magician kings. Very much for the same reason, the concept that at this time, that there's a phenomenon called the wild hunt.
Mm-hmm.
These spirits that fly through the air at night, and if you hear crows cawing at night, you'll know the wild hunt is out. And just spirits having a good time, sometimes at our expense. There's a kind of a sense of marauding ghosts and spirits and witches going out to meet them at this time of year where everybody's cold and shivering inside, but the witches and the ghosts are out there having a good time anyway. And through Valentine's Day, which derives from a pagan Roman, the oldest of the pagan Roman holidays that we know of, the Lupercalia, the Festival of the Wolves, which is also a fertility festival. It's death and life, death and birth. The big mysteries. Well,
this life of ours is rather unique because from the moment you're conceived is the moment you start to die.
Yes, right.
And it's what happens in between that's so important.
Yeah, and you really have to really live your life the best that you can.
Final question for you before we say goodbye for tonight. What's with black cats and witches?
It was believed in many places, and again, you can read this in the witchcraft testimonies, that the reason people are afraid of black cats
Mm-hmm.
is because they weren't really cats. They were witches in disguise.
Ooh.
And so that's why you would cross the street to avoid one. It's not that it's a cat. It's that maybe it was a witch out in her business and you didn't want to get in trouble with her. Which is actually very sad because I have a black cat.
Mm-hmm.
Black cats and black dogs are there's a phenomenon. They are often the last adopted from shelters because people are afraid.
And that is true.
They are, and of course they are lovely animals. It doesn't make a difference what color. It's fur. It's like
Mm-hmm. They didn't ask to be born with black fur.
Huh? And they're beautiful.
They are.
So
they truly are.
Yeah.
So what are your plans for this Halloween?
I am going to Massachusetts. I will be. One of the things that is a phenomenon now are witches' balls.
I beg your pardon?
Witches' balls. No, not balls. Witches' balls, like dance balls.
Okay.
Like Cinderella.
All righty.
Cinderella's going to the ball. She could be going to the witches' ball.
Okay, so if you would have said warlock balls, that would have had a totally different context.
I am going to go to a charity. As a matter of fact, I'm going to the Witches' Cotillion in Marlborough, Massachusetts, which is a benefit for a cat charity.
It's wonderful.
So and I'll be speaking about the rituals of Halloween, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
So you're going to the ball to have a ball.
I'm going to the ball to have a ball, and people think that the only balls are in Salem, Massachusetts. And in New Orleans.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You kind of cut out there. People think the only what?
A lot of people think that the only witches' balls are in Salem, Massachusetts, Salem, or in New Orleans for the vampire. And there's a big vampire ball in New Orleans, for the Anne Rice novel.
Right.
But there are witches' balls all over now. It's a growing phenomenon, and it's fun, and a lot of them are charity benefits, and it's a nice way to spend the evening.
Judika, you and I have to say so long for now, my dear friend. I want to thank you ever so much for coming on. Always great talking to you. Don't forget to come back and see us again. And thank you so much. Thank you for telling us about
Halloween.
Yeah, I really loved hearing about the witches' balls. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. www.JUDIKA ILLES is the website. A great lady, and we'll have her back before Christmas with Santa balls, Christmas tree balls, whatever. Don't go away. We'll be right back.